Welcome back. How's your gut biome after lunch? Reconstituted. Nice. And your liver in a little while? Okay. We should do the point of care testing. I used to manage an emergency department, and so a lot of attention on point of care testing. We'd go around and do a stick and then report everybody's blood sugar and lipid profile. Anyway, welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the lunch. I do understand not everybody loves fish. Apologies. For those of you who don't like fish. Yeah, you? Yeah, sorry. Just we didn't want to do chicken 2 days in a row. But I'm glad the squash is good. Well, now we're taking another turn again. Now we're going to focus a little bit more on activity and exercise. And to kick that off, Becca Martin from Kennedy Krieger is going to intersect some stimulation and some exercise, and then after that we'll hear from Hal and Mike from Perfect Step, and we'll continue the conversation. Welcome, Becca. Thanks.
Thanks. Well, I want to first say thank you to the organizers for having me, and thank you for you all for sticking with me in this coveted after lunch spot. I'm hoping that you will find it to be useful and interesting. I was saying to somebody this morning, I sort of feel like the missing link here, right? I'm a therapist, I do research. I'm gonna talk about transcutaneous stim and activity-based therapy. And if we were playing presentation bingo, somebody should have just won because I checked all the boxes. So someday I'm gonna make a lot of money doing this. Today is not that day, so I don't have any personal relevant financial disclosures. I do get funding from the Orikawa Foundation for my research. Everybody puts up these really nice headshots of their lab, these people that help them contribute. I don't have a lab, I have a gym. These are my people, right? These are my patients, my staff, and their families, because it is a group effort, and this is what we look like. Okay, so I thought I would start with a recap. I woke up at 6 o'clock this morning and I was like, oh, I have to change my slides. This is what I learned yesterday. So first of all, that the natural recovery is complicated and it is limited. So Jerry Silver gave us a really nice description and a much more technical version of this. But basically there are 5 problems in the spinal cord. One is that initial cell loss, the secondary cell death, and that cavitation that fills in with fluid and forms a cyst. Second is this glial scar that surrounds that cyst and gives off inhibitory molecules that Jerry is trying to address, Dr. Silver is trying to address. There are also transected axons and axons that are demyelinated. In both cases, those represent a conduction block, which is a problem. But there are axons across the level of the injury that are spared. And we heard that pretty clearly yesterday, and we heard it again this morning. It's a complicated problem, but we're making some progress. So here it is. Here's again the cord after injury. And again, what I heard yesterday and again this morning is that to get to the next step, we're gonna need a little something extra. So it might be cells or some sort of proteins that we inject into the spinal cord to eat up some of the damage or make the situation more optimal inside the cord. It might be these bridges or scaffolds seeded with stem cells and growth factors to help direct axonal regrowth. And it might be that we can supercharge some of these remaining axons into doing their job better. So there is something coming and we're headed that way. But what I have heard very clearly all weekend, and I hope that everybody in this room has heard, is that it is a combination strategy. It is going to require all of us to work together in a way that we have this common end goal, and that rehab has to be a part of the situation, right? It has to be a part of the game. What you heard yesterday and what you heard this morning is that in isolation, that stimulation, the cells, whatever it is, make things a little bit better, rehab a little bit better, and so now can we start to put these things together? So first I want to sort of set the stage for activity-based therapy and what it is that we do at Kennedy and what you're going to hear some more about this afternoon. So there is a shift, and you guys are up front of this shift, and we are moving from compensation towards restoration. It is no longer sufficient for me to send people home with a bag of adaptive equipment and a transfer board and say, good luck with your life. It's just not acceptable. And so we have this whole host of scientific evidence to show that recovery is possible, but that recovery is activity dependent, and that specific environments and equipment can actually be limiting. There's some good evidence to show in stroke populations that if you train the unaffected side, so you teach people to compensate with their strong arm, the pathology in the brain affecting the affected side actually gets worse. So we can make your neurological system worse if we don't address it. This is a fun game. This was a study that came out of WashU in St. Louis, where they looked at 312 therapy sessions post-stroke in acute rehab. So these are 60-minute sessions, 60-minute sessions. How much time do you think patients actually get of therapy? 10, okay, it's a little better than that. A little better than 17, 36 minutes. It's about 60% of your time. If the goal of the session was upper extremity functional movements, they were doing 32 repetitions. And it gets worse if we're talking about lower extremity things. It's just simply not enough, right? We saw videos of rats walking on treadmills. We have seen videos of rats going up and down the stairs and climbing ladders and things. That happens over the course of hours a day, not 36 minutes. It also, nobody puts rats in wheelchairs. Nobody is feeding the rats either. And so all of that activity is inherent in this rat model when we talk about recovery, and could be a reason why we're not seeing the same outcomes in humans. So what is activity-based therapy? And if you stand close to me for more than 30 minutes, you will hear me say this. My husband says I say it in my sleep. It's a thing. It is repeated near normal activity specifically below the level of the lesion to optimize the nervous system for recovery and offset the rapid aging and chronic complications that patients like you incur. And that's critical, because no matter what happens in any of the labs that have been discussed to this point, if your body's not ready for it, it's not going to be for you. We provide a high-intensity, task-specific, and patterned activity both above and below the level of the lesion to restore function to the nervous system. So we still have a problem though, right? Like if it was that simple and I had fixed the problem. So there's a problem still in terms of recovery of walking. So about 60% of new spinal cord injuries are incomplete, and recovery of walking is consistently rated as a high rehab goal. And the only thing that has been empirically validated to be superior when we look at rehab interventions is intensity and dose. So you can compare outcomes for robotics, electrical stimulation, manual facilitation. They're all pretty equal, except to say that patients who got more did better, right? So we have this problem, this inherent problem. How do we turn up the volume in the system? How do we give more activity to the nervous system in a way that is practical and feasible? Because although we walk rats on treadmills for 3 hours a day and don't give them wheelchairs, we can't do that to people. So I am proposing today here that part of the solution could be this transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation. There are some advantages to the TSCS over the epidural stimulation that you heard about yesterday, although certainly as the projects evolve, we might change our mind about which is best and for whom. But TSCS is non-invasive and reversible. It produces an increase in spinal excitability, specifically to the locomotor circuits through excitation of the dorsal root afferents, right? So it is stimulation across the surface of the skin that increases excitation in the spinal cord so that we can unmask latent voluntary function, or so that those connections that are still intact across the level of the lesion can do their job better. I was explaining this to a patient's father who's an engineer, and he said, oh, you're just putting some noise into the system to turn up the volume on the spared connections. And I was like, yes, that's it. So, we're out of order here. We all, ignore those photos for a second. We all hope that rehab looks like this, right? It's a nice, straight, steep line with some good progress, that over time your performance gets better. That's what we hope. What we know to be true is that it probably looks more like this. We can make things better with therapy, but to a limit. We also know, and other people have shown, that if we introduce some neuromodulatory input, we can make things immediately better. So can we play that first video? The one on the left. So this is a patient who is an Asia A. He has a complete injury. He's a high thoracic injury, and he has one electrode over his spine and 2 dispersives on his abdomen, and you can see we're turning the stimulation up. And as we do that, you can see him pull into some flexion, and then Brooke will continue to turn it up, and you'll see this activation of a reciprocal cycling type motion. This kid can move nothing on his own. He had just seen the movie The Good Dinosaur, and he was like, look, I'm like Arlo, I can run. And you'll see in a second, Brooke stops the stimulation, and all of that motion goes away. And he returns to his baseline status, which is a little bit of spasticity. Oh wait, can we go back to the other slide? Don't play that video yet. So okay, go back, go ahead, play the other video. So we know that over time, so that blue line, this one here, we know that over time with training and neuromodulation, we can get an effect. And so we sent this kid home with a stimulator, and his parents were very diligent about doing the spinal stimulation in combination with his walking therapy at his outpatient clinic. He also is a regular FES cycler and stretching, right? His parents do all the right thing. So now play that second video, please. So now you can see he's able to voluntarily crawl on his own. So this kid was injured at 18 months. He's 10 in this video, and he's recovered this ability to move his legs in a reciprocal way that he can make useful. So then there's the question, what happens if we take the neuromodulation away? Right? So what we don't know is it possible that patients will continue to make gains even after we take it away? Is it possible just that they maintain the gains that they've gotten when we take it away? Or is it possible that they will get worse? And these are all the questions that we don't yet know. And like any good scientist, it just brings up more questions. Right? So there's all kinds of questions about dose and timing, what kind of training, and how long does it need to occur that lots of people are working on and trying to answer. One of the things for me that was a sticking point is that all of the early literature in transcutaneous stimulation used a proprietary sort of secret waveform and a stimulator that is not commercially available. And so that really limits the population for whom it could be useful. So we set out to do a feasibility and efficacy study looking at the combination of a clinically available TSCS and 8 weeks of training. We had 2 aims in our study. We did look at electrophysiological outcomes, but I'm not going to talk about those today. I'm only going to talk about the walking function. So over 8 weeks, patients got 3 sessions a week. They did 2 hours of training and got 30 minutes of stimulation inside of that 2 hours. We measured with the 10-meter walk test, the timed up and go, the 6-minute walk test, and the whiskey. The 10-meter measures speed, the 6-minute measures endurance, the whiskey measures quality of walking and the need for assistive device, and the timed up and go is a fall assessment, but it requires somebody to stand up, walk 10 meters, turn around, come back, and sit down. We also looked at bowel and bladder function and pain through the International Basic Data Sets and secondary conditions scale. So the important thing I want to point out, and the thing that makes our study different from some of the other TSCS studies that you've heard about before, is that we use a symmetrical biphasic waveform. It looks like this. It is commercially available and clinically relevant. The stimulator that we used is available in hundreds, if not thousands, of clinics across the country. So this is that Russian current that I was alluding to before, that was used in all of the initial transcutaneous spinal cord stimulation studies, and I'm not going to talk about that. So here's a video of the same patient on the same day. Can you play the without video? So On the left side, she's walking without the stimulation. You can see she's wearing a CAFO on her left side, and she has very little control of the right side. She sort of flops around a bit. She's having to unweight a lot through her upper extremities, and she has a step 2 gait instead of that fluid step through. Can you restart that second video, please? So now you can see this is 10 minutes later after we've connected the stimulation. Can you play it again? Sam. Okay. So here's the stimulator, and here she is walking. You can see has much more fluid. She steps all the way through with that right side. She has knee flexion and control of that right side, and she's not having to unload as much through her upper extremities. It's not perfect, right? She didn't drop her walker and moonwalk out of the gym, but what it allows is for us to practice more normal steps at a higher intensity and a higher dose. And that's the game. That's the thing that wins in my book, is the more is better. And so if TSCS gives us an opportunity to do more, then maybe it's going to help us win the game. Because I'm pretending to be a scientist, here's our demographic table. We had a pretty even split between men and women, a pretty even split between cervical and thoracic injuries, a pretty even split between Asia C and Asia D. The thing I want to point out to you is that these patients are super chronic, so anywhere from 2 to 57 years post-injury. So it's reasonable to be generalizable to a lot of people. Here's the improvements in walking speed as measured by the 10-meter walk test. So what you're going to see on each of these next few slides are group means as indicated by the gray boxes here, individual scores in these colored lines, and then here is our change between session. We measured every 6 sessions, and that red line indicates the MCID. So that's the minimal clinically important difference. That's the smallest amount of change that is determined to be real and not just due to the passage of time. And so you can see here there is an improvement in our group means. You can see that most patients made good progress. The bottom patients stayed kind of flat. And that we reached the MCID by session 18, which is pretty early, right? That's 6 weeks worth of therapy. In the 6-minute walk test, again, we have improvements in group means, we have improvements in individual scores, and now we exceed the MCID at only 12 sessions. So we're getting better faster. And then the timed up and go test, we still have an improvement. You want to be faster in this case, so you want the scores to go down, but we never reach that MCID, and that could be because the turning, the sit down, the stand up is a different skill than walking, and we didn't train for that. And then in terms of the whiskey, there's a ceiling effect, so you see the really high patients stay flat and the bottom patients stay flat, but there is a group mean change, and we exceed the MCID at only 12 sessions. That's 2 weeks. In all of our outcome measures, we had statistically significant improvements. About half the subjects reported recovery of or improvement in voluntary voiding of bowel and bladder. 2/3 reported improvement in pain, both musculoskeletal and neuropathic. And interestingly, only very few subjects reported change in sensation. That's to light touch, pinprick, or vibration. So it's safe and feasible in an outpatient setting. It makes things better. Your job now becomes how do we pump up the gyms everywhere we go, right? That's the game, is turn up the volume in the system. So for you, what can you do, right? So 1 is to go home and incorporate this high volume repetition during stimulation. And 2 is to do as much as possible in an upright and weight-bearing position, and then do more. If your therapist is not pushing reps and intensity, get a new therapist. If you do not leave therapy feeling worn out and sweaty in whatever way that is for you, you should get a new therapist. And you should not feel bad about asking for that, because that's what you need. So these are the people that have helped me with the study. Specifically, our patients and families are really important to me. They are why I do this work. You are why I do this work and why I want things to get better. And I'm going to take questions after the other presentations.
Thanks, Becca. Thanks, Becca. And I want to preface it a little bit in similar but different. Becca, thank you so much. There are people studying this, and there are people driven differently, like Becca just finished her talk, which is refreshing and appreciate. And then I want to give you just a brief backstory on why Hal and Mike are here. And at least from our perspective, which you'll hear in their presentation, we recognize, again, this whole idea of from discovery all through the way through the clinic. I think we all understand, recognize, agree that rehab is the real world, real life complement to whatever intervention happens. And even without an intervention, it's the real life necessity for staying healthy, staying fit, mitigating some of the consequences from SCI. So rehab is critical and critically important. But we have a problem in our community, and that problem is there's not enough capacity in the system for everybody to get the kind of exercise and activity that Becca just described. There aren't that many therapists to go to and say, well, you need a new therapist. Well, there aren't any. And if there are, I have to pay out of pocket to get it. And that's not right. That's not okay. And that's not going to get us where we need to get. And so one of the things that really interested me, and when I talked to Hal and met Hal, is that they're doing a study to examine the public health impact of exercise, which we all know is good for us and will help us in terms of our health and quality of life. But nobody's really going to make that case, I don't think, except us, except our community. And so these guys are taking that on, and they're going to talk about it. So welcome. He's getting to it.
He's doing it back there.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay.
Okay, well, my name is Mike Alpert. I'm the president and CEO of the Claremont Club in Claremont, California, where I've been in that position since August of 1997. Claremont Club I'll get to in a minute, but the reason for this talk is exercise is medicine. We feel very strongly about that. We've been leading that initiative globally from the health club side. We think that if it were a pill, everybody would be prescribing it and everybody would be taking it. A little bit about the Claremont Club. I started to tell you it's a large club. It's on 19 acres in Claremont, California, which is about 40 miles east of Los Angeles. We employ about 270 staff. We have a little over 10,000 members. And we work on a pretty large operating budget, just about $15 million. The key players are our staff, all management, all involved in these programs, and certainly our partners, the Be Perfect Foundation. And later I'll tell you about a couple other programs we're running where we're using exercise as medicine.
You are one of our $7,000 recipients.
Oh, well, almost 6 years ago, the Claremont Club was part of our first ever Pay It Forward story on Eyewitness News. And through the years, we followed their progress.
Well, typically, things don't work, so the video doesn't work. We wanted you to see this. But let me tell you how we started on this journey with Hal and his family and what's evolved to treating 107 clients. My daughter grew up with Hal, went to school with Hal all through elementary school, high school, and they were about to go to college. They were both going to attend Long Beach State University. I got a call at the club one day from my daughter, and she's crying, she's hysterical, and my first question is the car running and are you okay? But what in reality was the problem was Hal had been in this horrific accident. He was actually delivering handicap accessible equipment to a client of his father's in Las Vegas, swerved in the highway to miss a large truck tire, rolled a very large truck about 4 times, had a C6 complete, spinal cord injury. You want to try it again?
Are one of our $7,000 recipients.
So, carrying on
Oh,
here.
well, almost 6 years ago, the
He was
Claremont Club
airlifted
was
to
part of our first
Arrowhead
ever
Regional
Pay It Forward
Trauma
story on
Center, where
Eyewitness
he
News.
underwent
And through the
surgery
years, we
for
followed
his
their progress as they've
injury,
grown
and
dramatically.
then was
Now
moved
the
over
club is
to
the
an
subject
acute
of a new
rehab
documentary called
hospital
Exercise
about
is
7
Medicine,
miles
and
from our
Alex is
club,
back
Casa
with more. Hi,
Clina,
Alex.
Yeah, well, thank
where
you so
he
much. Joining us
underwent his
now
post-acute
is Mike
and
Alpert,
transitional
who's the president
living
and CEO of the
treatment
Claremont
and
Club,
therapy
and Dr. Robert Salas
before
from
being
Kaiser
released.
Permanente. Great to have you both here.
My
So
wife
first
and I
off,
went
what
to
is the
visit
concept?
him
What is
about
exercise as
two
medicine?
weeks after he got
Exercise as
there.
Medicine is a global
And
health
we went in,
initiative
and
that really
he
just
did not come
encourages
out of his room. He
physicians
was pretty
to ask patients
depressed.
about their physical
But there
activity
were
habits and
several
prescribe
high school
exercise
friends of his
like it was a
that were
medication.
staying
And
in the hospital,
really, at the
sleeping there
end of the day, what
overnight.
we hope to do
Really
is
inspired
merge
us to
the
see
healthcare
these
industry
young
with the
adults
fitness industry, so that a
and
physician
the
can
commitment
refer
and support
a
they
patient
had
to
for
a health
Hal.
club to help them get
We
more
went
active.
back about
And that's
2
what's
weeks
been going on
later
at
and
the
met
Claremont Club.
Hal and
And let's
his
talk
mother and
about that,
father for
Mike.
the
One of
first
the places
time.
where that's happening at the Claremont Club is
They had
Project
been
Walk, something
members
we've
of our
been,
club for a long, long
profiling
time,
for
and I
several
was
years
embarrassed
now.
to say
What
I'd
is
never
it? How
met
does
them.
that work?
But I knew
Project Walk is
a
one of
wonderful
several
family
programs
doing
we
a
have
lot of
that
wonderful
help
things in
people
our
struggle with
community.
chronic injuries
And I made a
chronic
comment to
illness.
his
Project
mom and
Walk
dad. I
focuses
said to
on
them,
spinal cord
you
injuries
know,
and
he's
other
going to get
forms
out of
paralysis.
transitional living
And
care
it
pretty
uses
soon.
specific
Let's get him out of
equipment
this
to get people
clinical
up and moving
environment,
again,
and let's
results
get him back
that
into
the
an
people
environment
have
that he
is
grew
just-
up in,
it
that
just
he
blew
was
me
used
away.
to. A more electric,
The disease
energetic
I have is called
environment at our club, and we'll
PLS,
work with him there.
which is in the
I proceeded
family
to
of
go to my car
ALS
and sit
and
down in
Lou
the driver's
Gehrig's
seat and turn over to
disease.
my wife
The
and say,
impact
Annie,
of-
what did I say to his parents? You know, where am I going to put him? I have no room. And what are we going to do with him? I've never worked with anybody that had no feeling below their neck. And went home and thought about it and thought about it and thought about it and actually prayed about it a lot and couldn't come up with a solution. So I did the next best thing. I had a board meeting coming up about 2 weeks after that. And I lied to my board members and told them I needed a second Pilates studio, which I did not need. And by the way, I've since told them I lied to them and they didn't fire me. But it allowed me to convert an 800 square foot racquetball court and try to do something with Hal. The problem was I didn't have the money to convert that court, so went back to thinking and praying again, found the money, and we converted a racquetball court. Nobody of our 28 personal trainers wanted to work with him. They were afraid working with someone that had no feeling below their neck. They could break his femur moving him from one piece of equipment to another. He could bleed out and die, and nobody would know he was even hurt. So we sent my wellness director and 2 of our personal trainers, one was a retired physical therapist, down to Carlsbad to a place called Project Walk. We rented them an apartment, sent them down there for 4 weeks to learn how to work with people that were paralyzed. They came back and we started working with Hal. And his lead physiatrist over at Casa Clina Hospital started to see improvements. First of all, in his feeling about himself, his attitude, his overall feeling of self-worth, and then in his physical capabilities, started to see improvements. So Dr. Patterson, Dave Patterson, started sending other patients of his to us. And we went from just treating Hal, then we had 4 people, and then we had 8, and then we had 17. And if you've ever been in an 800 square foot racquetball court, when you have more than 2 or 3 people in there with wheelchairs and equipment, very hard to navigate, and the circulation flow is very poor. During this time, I had done a 23,000 square foot remodel of our club, and an expansion actually of the club. And I had leased out 3,000 square feet to Pomona Valley Hospital Medical Center, large hospital in our area, that wanted to have a physical therapy annex in North Claremont. And so we gave them a very large lease, and meaning length of time. And they had a presence there, and I convinced their CEO, Rich Yoakum, to move out and let us take that lease back about 21 months before it was due. And we went in, raised the ceiling a little bit, put some mirrors on the walls, put new flooring in, painted, and opened the first Project Walk franchise in the world, February 1st of 2013. We opened that up with 17 spinal cord injured clients. using a non-traditional methodology in treating spinal cord injured clients. So what that was is, instead of treating them above the level of injury, we were treating them below the level of injury, trying to get the neurons in the brain to refire below the level of injury, using pattern neuroactivity recruitment, which in layman's terms is constant muscle movement and memory, using load-bearing exercises. And what we would do with a new client that came in, we would treat them like mom treated us when we came out. Lay us on a mat, see if we could roll. If we could roll, we were taught to crawl, then to kneel, to sit, to stand. So we opened this up with 17. February 1st of 2013, within a year, we had 65 clients, and we expanded by 2,100 square feet, added 2,100 square feet onto this studio. Now understand, this studio takes up a very, very small space in this total club. And what we found out early on, that we had to treat the whole family, not just the individual that had the injury. Whether it was mom and dad or siblings, we had to open up the club to all of it, and we had to have programs for all of them while they were with us in the program. I can tell you that during this time, I got a phone call from a gentleman by the name of Gary Jones, who's the engineer that designed a lot of life fitness, cardio and strength equipment, and also developed the hammer strength equipment. And he was working with Augie Nieto, who's an icon in our industry. He was the developer and owner of Life Fitness and Hammer Strength. And I had known him since 1991. In 2005, he was diagnosed with ALS. And Augie heard about some work we were doing with spinal cord injured clients at our club and wanted to know if he could come from Newport Beach to Claremont, about 48 miles, and start working out at our facility with our methodology. It's a very long story I won't bore you with, but the bottom line to that is I was worried about taking Augie because we had never dealt with someone that had ALS. Number one, he couldn't communicate with us when he was out of his power chair, so we wouldn't know when he was in distress. We had to work around his respirator, his breathing tube, his neck brace, and I really didn't know if we should take him. And looking at him, the answer was very clear: how could we not? So we started working with Augie. Now, Augie has raised about $140 million for ALS research through ALS TDI in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Most of that's come from our industry, the health club industry. What happened with Augie, finding the success we could have with him, and these are things he was told he'd never be able to do again. Sitting at a 45-degree angle on a incline bench and doing leg presses with 140 pounds 30 times. Having wrist and forearm flexion and extension. A lot of things you can go to Google and Google Augie Nieto at Corona del Mar Beach, and you'll see him in a customized recumbent bike driving around the parking lot with a bit piece that allows him to turn left or right or stop. But what happened there is a light went off, and it said, if we could help someone with ALS, could we help someone with cerebral palsy? Or could we help someone with multiple sclerosis, or a stroke patient, or someone with Parkinson's? And now, of the 104 or 107 clients that we're working with, 46 of them are non-spinal cord, all other forms of neuromuscular paralysis. So anyhow, I got ahead of myself a little bit here, but we expanded that facility by 2,100 square feet. And a year ago, last January, did the last expansion of another 1,700 square feet. We are now at about just about 7,000 square feet, as I said, with 104 active clients, all of which get full membership to the club for as long as they're with us. And everything socially that we do or activity-based is free to their whole family. That includes all our 13 weeks of summer camps for their children, field trips, everything we do. And it's been a true blessing. Our goal is really to help bridge the gap between fitness and healthcare and bring the experts in both together to start working together instead of so independently, particularly when we know the powerful, powerful effect that exercise has on overall health. And I also think we have a societal obligation to build and maintain healthy communities. What's been missing all these years, because we have seen the results and the improvements in the people that are in our programs, we've been missing the medical data, collection of data and research and publication of that data. And now I will tell you that we have 3 institutional review board approved medical research studies going on with Kaiser Permanente, and the importance there is that they're the largest healthcare provider in the United States, and with City of Hope, which is one of the 3 leading cancer research hospitals in America. The three programs, we have 55 people in our spinal cord injured program. Hal will speak about that in a minute. We have put through 1,200 women and their families in our Living Well After Cancer program. And we have a very large program called Cycling for Parkinson's, with Parkinson's also being funded by Kaiser Permanente. The results of all 3 from the medical data, the scientific data, is just unbelievable. We'll be doing a talk next week in Chicago on the cancer program with the woman that's doing the research for City of Hope on that program. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to Hal, and he'll tell you more about our spinal cord injury program.
I'll tell you when. How's it going, everybody? So I'm here just to talk a bit about the Perfect Step in particular, which is one of the departments at the Claremont Club's campus in Claremont. As you read earlier, the Perfect Step and what we believe sets us apart, and by no means is this any reflection of any assertion that I'm making that anybody out here with any freestanding facility isn't equally as credible, or we have the golden egg or the secret sauce, so to speak. But I'm here to tell you why we are a firm believer in our product and our service that we provide in the form of activity-based therapy, working below the level of injury through exercise-based therapy practices, if you will. We're a firm believer that when you remove the body from the comfortable environment of the wheelchair and put it in an anatomically correct state, positive things can happen. And so with that, we believe that we ultimately facilitate physical therapy-like properties for occupational therapy-based results. And so we treat the body holistically rather than focusing on the ailment, so to speak, because we believe that holistically speaking, when you can treat the whole and work below the level of injury, that can then induce positive-minded thinking, mentalities, and obviously physical recovery, which is why we're here. This weekend, we've heard a lot about FES, epidural stimulation, and we've also heard from many of us sitting in the crowd, 5 more years there's going to be a cure. But what are we doing for preventative medicine? Long-term thinking. We have a firm belief at the club, namely at the Perfect Step, that we believe that exercise is the most powerful form of preventative medicine in the world. And we believe that that facilitation of exercise is done by 3 core components to our program, that being pattern neural activity recruitment, our ability to recreate functional movement patterning to induce neuroplasticity in the able-bodied human being, or namely through rats. It takes about 400 to 600 repetitions for neuroplasticity to be induced. So with that, through high repetition, high volume, and high frequency of our clients visiting our program, we believe that there is ability for reconnection to take place below the level of injury. Additionally, with that to be complemented with load-bearing and exercise, there are 3 core competencies that we believe can happen. Number 1, mental and emotional capacity can increase. And the 2 measures that we assessed in our particular study that we're doing with Kaiser Permanente are, number 1, increased quality of life, and secondly, reduction of secondary complications. So with that, I want to introduce to you guys just the main slide of our exercises medicine study that we did with Kaiser Permanente, which was facilitated by Dr. Bob Salas and Alex McDonald. Bob Salas is the one leading the World Exercises Medicine Initiative based out of Kaiser Fontana. They are the ones funding the study with us, and we are their flagship location to roll this out for people with chronic illnesses and neurological disorders. And so basically how we facilitated this study was we chose to focus on spinal cord injured clients within our program. Albeit we have around 74 or 75, as you can probably imagine, given that we are dealing with humans, people aren't always as motivated as you would like. We ended up being able to commit 41 of them through the first 2 rounds of the study. And so round 1 of the study studied measures. There was over 90 of them based off of a Likert scale of either 1 to 5 or 0 to 4, which assessed things like POMS, profile of mood states, pain, independence, bowel and bladder, and pressure sores. And so the first round of the study indicated those measures 7 days prior to those individuals starting in our program. Round 2, which we just got the results back from, was 6 months after being in our program. Round 3 will be facilitating around Christmas time of this year, and then the 4th and final round will be a following year after that to measure metrics based off of a year in our program and then 2 years later in our program. And so here were some of our findings. And so after involvement in the Perfect Step program, we can note that here are the things that increased. Mood and quality of life indicators all significantly increased. Measures of wellness and self-confidence all increased. Pain scores and scores indicating that pain interfered with daily life all decreased, and measures of independence all improved. Complemented with that, also fewer urinary tract infections, fewer complications of daily impact from urinary tract infections, fewer pressure sores and fewer complications and life impact from pressure sores. So how do I articulate this to you in a way that makes sense? So in the way that I can is down below, the answers of true statistical significance as according to the p-scores being less than 0.05. And I can show you the data later if you are that interested. But all of those things that you see below for POMS, mind you, those are profile of mood states, all of those things were increased from round 1 of the survey to round 2. This is just 6 months after being in the program. We saw all of these measures change. So they became less tense. They were less unhappy. They were less annoyed. They were less discouraged. They were less uncertain about things. They were less bitter, et cetera, et cetera. And then if you go to pain interfering with one's ability to work at home or work, that then decreased. And you can see the measures all the way across through independence, bladder complications, and pressure sores. This is something internally within our staff that we've had a belief in. And mind you, we have not had the luxury of having licensed skilled therapists on our staff, which is why we are here. What are we going to do with this data? How do we intend to move forward with it? And it's very simple. We intend to do with it, number 1, we are trying to move the needle to get governmental reform. To get this in front of the key players, the people at the governmental level that can acknowledge outpatient therapy programs, like many of you that are in the crowd, to acknowledge the fact that even without, God bless all of you that are licensed skilled therapists, without individuals like you on staff, that there still is some credibility and validity to what we're doing in regards to keeping people out of the hospital and reduction of their secondary complications, namely giving them better quality of life and better mental and emotional fortitude to want to go out and be better productive members of society. Why is this all important? Well, for the very reason we're talking about it. If we can keep our spinal cord injured individuals, which we believe the other neurological disorders all do fall under this as well, out of the hospital, shouldn't that be something that insurance companies are willing to acknowledge in the form of preventative care? We would think so, and we would hope so. So with that, how can we then take this a step further? To get reimbursement. If we can get reimbursement, let's just say from third-party healthcare providers, insurance companies to the tune of, let's say, $10,000 to $15,000 a year, what can that do for positive-minded thinking for a long-term outlook on somebody's preventative care post-spinal cord injury? To stay involved with activity-based therapy, to stay involved with something that is exercise-based. And let me just tell you, with what we do, how does this affect indirectly somebody's recovery? So through load-bearing, reduction of osteopenia and osteoporosis, through circulatory training on spin bikes and through gait training, what can that do to reduce the ability for somebody's susceptibility to have blood clotting, for somebody to better regulate blood pressure? Also through activity and through strength training to contract muscles that otherwise wouldn't be sedentary, to put more musculature back on the body to make people less susceptible to pressure sores. I can go on and on and on about the importance of exercise. We believe that exercise is the most powerful form of medicine in the world. How can you be involved? This is a strength in numbers endeavor. Could you imagine if we were running this same quality of life survey at all of you other freestanding facilities across the country, and in form of data, what we could take to present to people at the higher ups and what type of credibility and validity that could form? We believe that there's something there, and you can all be a part of it. What do we plan to do with it? Well, with this, we are partnered with Kaiser Permanente, Dr. Alex McDonald, and Dr. Bob Salas. They're anticipating wanting to take this and publishing this in the journal for the American College of Sports Medicine. Mike spoke that we're going to be next week at Club Industries Conference, which is a fitness club-based conference in Chicago, and they have a firm belief behind what we are doing in Claremont to give better quality of life and more reduction of secondary complications for individuals living with spinal cord injury and paralysis. With that, there's plenty more I could show you. I'm probably running out of time. I'll acknowledge it on the panel. Thank you for having me, and I'd love to talk to you all later.
Thanks, Hal. Thanks, Mike. Becca? There you are. Well, let's take some questions. Anisha. Okay.
Thanks, Leah. So I guess this is also on behalf of those who are live streaming in. I have two questions that are highly related, so maybe I'll just ask both of them. So the first one is from Niall El Hassad, and his question is for Rebecca, and he wants to know what device that you're using for the TSCS study.
So we use a Vectra Neo, which is a clinical tower model. It is programmable. And I bet I know what the next question is, but go ahead, ask it.
I mean, maybe you can go on. I don't think it's quite that related.
Oh,
but.
okay. I thought it was going to be about waveform. So, so we use the Vectra Neo in the clinic. It is, you plug it into the wall. We have a 10-foot long extension cord. We drag it up and down the hallway with us when we're walking. We have tried with smaller handheld stimulators, but they just don't necessarily produce enough juice. And so we have tried lots of different kinds of stimulators.
Thanks. And the second question is from Tommy Sudor. Apologies if I'm mispronouncing the name. So he had a question about your experimental protocol for the 10-meter walk test and the 6-minute walk test. He wanted to know whether it was tested with the stimulation on, or were those tests without the stimulation?
Without.
Without stimulation.
So all of our testing was done without stimulation, baseline every 6 sessions, and then afterwards. So the change that I saw you was change in real voluntary function, not stimulated function.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Hey, question for Hal.
Yes, sir.
Devil's advocate position here, but as you spoke about clinical results that involve things like improved mood, I guess first level question is, that was based on self-reported opinion about one's mood?
Sure, I guess one could argue that anything that was captured in the form of data from this is all self-reported, and subjectively speaking, everybody's going to respond differently, to their own circumstances with spinal cord injury itself, their at-home life, but we believe that there's some controllables there in the form of exercise and the ability for that to increase endorphins, to show levels of positivity with increased activity, to find a network and something that is very holistic minded, and people that you look around that are going through similar like injuries that can ultimately give you a better peace of mind, leaving that type of setting, if you will.
Sure, sure. Well, you know, coming from a personal perspective of being a big fan of exercise generally, and including as much involvement as possible with adaptive sports as it relates to all of this, where is a control group? So you reported about, if I recall, and correct me on the numbers if you need to, you started out with about 75. You reported that 41 had the impetus to move on and complete your study. But is that not is that not, in essence, cherry picking the people who had the most motivation, had the most positive outlook in the first place? Have we yet compared this kind of group statistics on what you've done with this group with a control group, even if the control group is some other group that went through acute inpatient rehab and outpatient medical model, but did not go on to ABT?
Right. I think to speak exactly to what you're saying, I think that's why there's definitely an importance and strength in numbers here. And to acknowledge your control group question, the real way to do this would be, and forgive me for sounding very direct here, to try and get a number of people that are at home not participating in exercise-based therapy programs. So to acknowledge what you're saying, that would really give us the metrics of comparison that would be most beneficial for this. However, given what we were given in the form of a sample size, we had to utilize what we had. To what you're saying, to the 75 that we had access to and the 41 that responded, that might also play into what you're saying. These are highly motivated people already to do, fulfill on something like this. But really our pitch to them was this: if you were going to be involved with something like this, this could then help you potentially down the road in the form of reimbursement for your care. However, unfortunately, I can't go sit and knock on their door and hammer away at them and say, we need your help here. To be clear about this, through the first round of the study, we had around 58 people participate, but reeling in those 58 for the second round, it fell to about 41, so we nullified them out to make it 41 even for the first round, knowing who they were and that they matched up from round 1 to round 2. But to acknowledge what you said, very true.
Hi, Rebecca. I was just wondering what parameters you used for the crawling, not the wave, but like frequency and pulse width, stuff like that.
That was the question I was expecting was coming next. So we used 50 hertz and 1 millisecond, and intensity to tolerance. Either to tolerance, so we turned it up till they said stop, or we turned it up till we saw that reciprocal reflexive movement, and then we turn it back down. So it's a submotor in the case where patients had really high pain tolerance or no sensation. The literature started at 30 hertz, and depending on who you're talking to and what you think, different frequencies might bias you into different patterns of extension or flexion. But it's not clear to me yet what those are. And I'm a crappy researcher, but I'm a clinician first. And is there a good enough? And to us, 50 was it. And it turned out okay.
Remember the tolerance about?
It really varied between patients. Sometimes it's as low as 12 milliamps, and sometimes it's as high as like 75 or 80 milliamps.
Thank you. My question's for you, Rebecca. You obviously showed a video working with a child doing transcutaneous stim, and I was wondering if you tried it with other children or have plans to use it on more children.
We do. So we use it clinically a lot with our kids. Kids have a decreased burden of gravity and a lower abdominal circumference, so they're actually better candidates for the transcutaneous stim because there's less impedance. So we have used it a lot clinically with kids, and we're getting ready to start a study just as soon as somebody shows up with a bucket of money.
Okay, I have two questions, one for Rebecca and one for Hal. So the first one, can the stimulation be done on the SAGE unit? It can?
Yes.
And I guess a follow-up to that, what points are you putting it at? Like where on the person?
In our study, we did an electrode over the intervertebral space of T10 and T11 and dispersive electrodes over the iliac crest. The SAGE unit, if you have it at home, it won't go up to 1 millisecond. It will only go to 500 microseconds. But if you are friends with your therapist, they can unlock the wide pulse width for you. See, I'm a crappy researcher.
Yes.
I'm telling you all the things. But your therapist should be able to unlock a wide pulse width mode, and then you can stimulate at 1 millisecond.
Okay, awesome. And then the question, how do you guys incorporate electrical stimulation in your therapies or, exercises?
Certainly, and so we do it through a variety of different capacities, whether that's through restorative therapy bikes, RT300, their Excite unit. We've also explored with demos with MyoCycle, who I know is represented here today as well. Also the incorporation of using those units off cycle through various functional movement patterning. And then we also have access at our gym to what's called the GEO system made by rehab, and that also has the incorporation of functional electrical stimulation while over the robotic through gait training. And so certainly that's a point of emphasis with our staff to incorporate that. Obviously, there is an ability to innervate certain muscles and contract certain muscles that otherwise would be untapped without functional electrical stimulation. So there is definitely an emphasis on that inside of our facility.
Awesome. This is all brilliant, and I'm glad that you guys did this.
I have a question for you guys. And I think we may have talked about this on the phone, how when the survey was being designed, was there any discussion of, excuse me, using common data element sort of accepted surveys that are standard out there in sort of the rehab world or even in the research world to these tools, either modified or just flat out adopted as a part of the survey? Was that considered, or is it in there?
Right. So to answer that, part of some of the questions that were taken out in the form of measures were from the University of Washington self-efficacy scale. That was part of it for the PALMS readings. In addition to that, there were some other metrics that were provided, or measures rather, from Dr. Alex McDonald on things that he thought would be prevalent to be answered by those populations. And some of it were our own questions by our own specialists in-house of things that we wanted to gather data on, things that quite literally we acknowledge, I guess, out loud, but we wanted data to back what we felt we already know internally. We feel it's important to have that data to be able to broadcast to the masses of the importance of exercise, and not just at facilities like ours. And let me be very clear about that. I have a very high respect for every one of you who are out there that have, freestanding facilities or facilities attached to medical wellness centers. You are doing something to contribute to the quality of life of people in chairs. And so by no means do I see anybody as competitors. I see us working together in a common mission.
Hi there. So I have a question for both Rebecca and for Hal about the working together kind of thing and representing one of those freestanding centers in the U.S. So first, Rebecca, even though you're not a researcher, you seem to have done quite a fine job of taking on that project.
I say I'm a researcher. I am technically a researcher. I have a faculty appointment at Hopkins. I do research. It's real.
Well, it certainly seems real to me.
And I want people to remember that.
Okay, so your point is well taken. But is there a chance that other centers around the country can replicate or duplicate or copy or whatever it's called what you did and contribute to those types of results?
Yes. I think that there's a lot of space, right? I think the thing that is super important to me as a researcher is to do research that is clinically relevant and meaningful, and that you as a clinician leave here feeling like you could try it, right? That's important to me and the work that I do. And so it is designed for that people in therapy clinics, in freestanding clinics, might try some of these elements and could incorporate. If you're asking about like real formal collaboration, we're certainly open to that. I think when people talk about what's the next step, how do you get it over the threshold, like what's the next, how do we push the wheel? We need more subjects, we need larger samples, and we need people who are willing to be controls, because ultimately that's every piece of feedback I get from the real researchers is like, well, you don't have a control. I'm like, yeah, but do we need it? Because don't we have 30, 50 years of control subjects, and haven't they not shown progress? So,
and what do they say when you say that?
Where's your control?
Okay, thank you, because I would look forward to being able to do some research like that at our
I have
at our
one
gym.
business card left, but I'm willing to give it to you.
Okay.
Or you can take a picture of it, or
Cool.
certainly my contact info must be in that app somewhere.
Great.
Yes.
Okay. And Hal, the same question for you is, you know that we're pulling together a new association of centers like ours around the country, and look forward to working with you on those types of surveys and tests and results so that collectively we can show greater numbers of research subjects and outcomes and measures. So.
Well, thank you. And not to make another qualifying statement, I'm not a researcher either. I went to school for leadership and
It doesn't
management,
matter.
so this is over my head, and I apologize if I've devalued the credibility of the study to many of you informative doctors here. But as you mentioned, it's a strength in numbers endeavor. We're happy to be here. We hope to unite with all of you. And let's be honest about what's real here. It's a continuum of care that we all need. And it starts in the clinical setting. Research needs to be had. Assistive devices also need to be incorporated, and also preventative medicine. So if and when what we heard about earlier in the form of stem cell therapies do come, that you can raise your hand and be a candidate because you've sat at home and done nothing. You've actually got out, you've engaged in exercise, you've load bared, and you've kept your body in a state where you're able to be a recipient when those types of therapies and treatments do come down the road in the form of a cure.
Thank you. I want to add on just a quick thing again, kind of reiterate what I said at the front end. Again, one of the reasons why we wanted to have these folks, Becca being a lousy researcher, is because she's pushing what others are just researching maybe in a little more pristine environment, is pushing it to the clinic. And I think that's very important. And then with regard to how, you said you're not a researcher either. That doesn't matter. This is a first step. And in particular, for those of us here from the community, from those of us who are here who participate in activity-based exercise or run centers or want to run centers, this is a beginning step. The association is a beginning step. We all know that we need better access. Our community shouldn't be paying for this out of pocket. They're already not only physically injured, economically injured. Let's face it, 66% of people nationwide are unemployed. You can't afford $110 an hour out of pocket. And everybody's scrapping to raise money. And many of those centers are run by people who have an injury or families. And so this is an effort to create capacity over competition. And to begin to take the steps necessary that we all recognize, and we do, again, in relationship and together. So that's it's a starting point, and wanted to maybe shift the focus a little bit with these two presentations. So we're going to take a break right now, and then we'll come back for our two panels, the SCI 2020 follow-up panel. And for those of you who don't know what that is, Google quick NIH SCI 2020. I'll put up a slide to give you a little background, but it might help just to, jar the head a little bit. And then we'll follow up with these folks from Ohio and PA, and Jake and John from Wisconsin will chime in on some of our legislative advocacy efforts after that panel. So enjoy break. Thanks.